skips. We get through to Tolaga Bay and find out what locals really need. And is it time to rethink hundreds of houses planned for flood-prone Napier land? A local councillor joins us live too.
RNZ News at 5 o'clock. Good afternoon. Ahi Marie, I'm Evie Ashton. The government has announced initial relief packages for regions affected by Cyclone Gabrielle. A $50 million interim fund will go towards businesses, workers and the primary sector. The government's also putting $250 million into the National Land Transport Fund's emergency budget to rebuild important roads. Finance Minister Grant Robertson says there's a big journey ahead to respond, recover and to rebuild.
I want to be very clear. This is an interim package and more support will follow as we get a better picture of the scale, cost and needs in the wake of this disaster. I would note that in responding to previous major disasters, a rolling maul approach has had to be taken and this situation is no different.
Cabinet also agreed to extend the national state of emergency for another 7 days. Meanwhile, clean-up efforts from Cyclone Gabrielle are in full swing across the country, with many councils making progress reaching isolated communities. While some businesses are struggling to get back up and running, with power and water outages still a problem, others are gradually finding their feet. However, health authorities say there are outbreaks of infection from silts and contaminated debris in some areas, and people need to take care with the clean-up. In Auckland, numerous slips created by the cyclone are making it difficult for power repair crews to reach some communities. Roughly 2,000 households are still without power in the region. Felix Walton reports.
In the latest briefing, Emergency Management Duty Controller Rachel Callagher says some communities are only accessible by foot or air. She says crews are still planning how they'll tackle a number of slips, which could take days to clear. Murray Burt, the chief engineer at Auckland Transport, says there will be a clearer picture by the end of the week. But he says the easier to clear slips should be fixed in the next few days. The council plans to keep civil defence hubs open in the coastal communities of Piha and Muriwai, where slip-affected residents still need support and advice.
Residents in the waded upper settlement of Tinui, who are clearing up cyclone damage, are also battling an outbreak of gastro-illness. The editor of the Tinui Times, Carol Forrest, says it was inevitable it would happen. She says children are particularly vulnerable.
The silt out there is either in powder form or solid, and especially for children, they put their fingers in their mouths and what have you. That looks like what's happened at the moment. So it's also likely we'll get Giardia and Cryptosporidium.
Carol Forrest says Carterton Pharmacy has supplied the town with hydration kits free of charge. And COVID cases are increasing in Hawke's Bay, but health officials say many people haven't notified them due to Wi-Fi and power issues. The region's medical officer of health says there have been 299 reported cases over the last week. Dr. Bridget Wilson says it's a very difficult time as some people are still sharing space with a lot of others after losing their homes.
What we're starting to hear from our primary care colleagues is they're starting to see people come through with COVID, and certainly in our emergency response workforce that has been flagged as a potential issue.
Dr. Bridget Wilson says another problem is people getting infections from contaminated silt. The ASB has become the first bank in Gisborne to reopen after the cyclone. A technical team flew in from Auckland and installed a satellite so the bank could operate again. Branch manager Frank Ursig says there was a queue of people when the doors opened at 10 o'clock this morning. He says many just wanted to share their experiences of the devastating floods. Mr. Ursig says some of their stories were heartbreaking. And a Gloria Vale mother of 9 has told a court no one is forcing her to live at the West Coast Christian commune. Bethia Faithful has been giving evidence in an employment court hearing in Greymouth to determine whether 6 former Gloria Vale women were employees rather than volunteers. Mrs. Faithful, whose sister is one of the plaintiffs, told the court she's chosen a shared lifestyle.
The life that I live inside Gloria Vale is what I've chosen. Nobody's making demands on me. If I didn't want to do something that was at Gloria Vale, or the part of their beliefs or their principles or that, I wouldn't be there. I would go.
Piha Faithful says her husband has never treated her like a slave. In sport, doubt surrounds Kyle Jamieson's long-term international cricket future, with the Black Caps pace bowler to have back surgery later this week. Jamieson pulled out of the squad to play England last week because of a recurrence of the stress fracture he suffered last year. It's an injury which has been career-ending for some fast bowlers, but Black Caps coach Gary Stead hopes Jamieson can return.
He's seen a surgeon and he's getting back surgery later in the week, so it's obviously been a challenging and difficult time for Kyle and a big loss for us, and we'll know more in about 3 to 4 months of what that end prognosis looks like for him.
The White Ferns' hopes of making the T20 World Cup semi-finals in South Africa rely on Bangladesh upsetting the hosts on Wednesday. New Zealand had their first win this morning, beating Sri Lanka in their final group match. The Breakers captain, Tom Abercrombie, credits team culture for getting them to the Australian Basketball League Grand Finals for the first time in 7 years. Under new coach Modi Maor, Abercrombie says the team clicked straight away, but it hasn't always been easy.
We're a fiery group. There's been plenty of blow-ups, but it's all part of the process, and it comes back to good people all wanting to do the same thing. Their heart's all in the right place. We know that no matter what's going on.
The Grand Final series against defending champs Sydney Kings starts next week. And the Football Ferns play Argentina in Hamilton tonight, looking to bounce back from a 5-0 loss to Portugal last week. That's the news.
People under pressure.
What we're actually seeing going is an increase in family harm reporting. Dishonesty offending, at least on the numbers available to us, is less than its normal level.
Fragile power and phone systems.
It's slow, it's patchy, but we are seeing more services come into play.
And a glimmer of hope.
Monday afternoon was rock bottom. Tuesday morning, she was good. I didn't have water in my house. My paddocks were drained. My mates turned up. You know, every day's getting a little bit better.
We give you the full picture. Morning Report, weekdays from 6 on RNZ National.
And we're funded through New Zealand On Air. You're with Lisa Owen next on Checkpoint. Right now, the short forecast from Met Service to midnight Tuesday. Northland and Auckland, mostly fine. Isolated afternoon or evening showers. For the Coromandel Peninsula and Bay of Plenty, fine, but isolated showers developing this afternoon. Becoming mostly cloudy tonight with drizzle patches. Waikato to Whanganui and the Central High Country. Also for Gisborne, Hawke's Bay and Wairarapa, fine. Some isolated showers about the ranges during the afternoons and evenings. Manawatu, Horowhenua, Kapiti Coast and Wellington, partly cloudy. Nelson, Marlborough and Canterbury, also for Bulla, fine apart from a few showers developing in Bulla tomorrow morning and southern Canterbury tomorrow evening. Westland and Fiordland, periods of rain from south of Hokitika to Milford Sound. Otherwise mainly fine apart from isolated showers. Tomorrow, rain with heavy falls developing everywhere. Otago and Southland, fine today. Tomorrow, rain with heavy falls developing. And Chatham Islands, Te Kohu, fine, but cloudy periods increasing later tomorrow. It's 8 minutes past 5. I will have news headlines and traffic for you at 20 past 5.
Nā mihi iwi, tēnā koutou katoa, no mai haere mai ki Checkpoint e tēnei rā, ko Lisa Owen tēnei. Tonight, a financial lifeline for the areas hardest hit by Cyclone Gabrielle. The government's unveiled a $50 million fund to support businesses, workers and the primary sector. On top of that, the government's kicking in $250 million more for roading for state highways and local roads to get essential lifeline routes open. It's support businesses in Hawke's Bay desperately need to keep afloat and in turn keep people in their communities employed. Our reporter Jimmy Ellingham and cameraman Nick Monroe have the story.
Esk Valley business owner Justine Wilson struggles to comprehend the destruction wrought by Cyclone Gabrielle.
To be honest, I haven't even thought. Got to get emotional now.
So it's hit you hard?
Yep. As I say, there's worse people off, so, you've got to look after them first. We come second.
Kiwi-esque luxury lodge, which she and husband Baden operate, is intact, but water lapped close to its doors and silt covers their small winery. The lodge had a wedding party leave on Monday last week, and without power and only limited access to the valley, it may not welcome more guests for a while.
There's no way that anyone can get in anyway, so I've just cancelled the next 2 months and we'll go from there. But it's just too early to know. You know, it's only been a week, so we're all in just survival mode and just waiting to see what will happen, how much will get done in a couple of months' time. I mean, they've got a hell of a lot to do.
For a couple of nights, it provided a sanctuary for neighbours rescued by boat as floodwaters inundated the valley. They've since receded to reveal cars, caravans and even a house picked up and thrown downstream.
Obviously our vineyard has gone, but I mean, we're nothing, we're just a little vineyard, so compared to the rest of the valley, we're just very lucky. And it's just to me like a war zone down there, and all those people. Just, heartbreaking.
In Napier, businesses are reopening as power returns to the city.
So you can see we've got all the little day dresses there that, you know, you can accessorise with hats and gloves and the right shoes.
But, like Napier Antique and Jewellery Centre owner Raywin Daly, they've missed out on cashing in on a big annual weekend, returning after a COVID hiatus.
We had our Art Deco weekend coming up and it's just gone. We go overseas to source all our stock once a year, and you know, this is the time that we would have sold it all, so financially we are going to be way down, but we're so much better off than a lot of people.
She says the weekend would normally bring in enough income to see the business through winter.
You cannot move in the shop. People just are buying one thing after another, and it's just the best business ever at that time.
But what was it like instead?
Nothing. We opened partway through Saturday. We had no power till Friday night, and there was no one. I think we sold $100.
Mrs. Daly was hoping for wage support or tax relief from the government package announced today. Down Tennyson Street, Bloom Bouquets owner Rachel Harvey is rueing the loss of Valentine's Day business thanks to Cyclone Gabrielle.
It struck on one of our busiest days of the year, so we've lost quite a lot of stock. We also source all of our product as locally as we can, and so we're still in the process of figuring out what we can get from local growers, how they're going, how they're faring.
The florist remains closed while Mrs. Harvey tries to source fresh flowers. She's working at her laptop in a near-empty shop, one that's normally filled with bright colours and strong scent.
I'm just trying to get some communications out to my customers and to let people know what's going on. We still have no internet or power at our home, and fortunately power's back on at the shop now, so I'm down here trying to log on, trying to update our website, trying to send out some communications to our customers so that they know we haven't forgotten them.
Water has ruined Jordan Barraclough's Esk Valley home, but this morning he was clearing up at his ice cream shop and eatery at Bayview, north of Napier.
We've had to completely close as of when the Cyclone Gabrielle hit and we lost power on the Tuesday morning. It's just we just had to close and we haven't been able to reopen. I've got 7 staff who obviously rely on the job as well, so it's just more of a waiting game to when the power comes on and we can get everyone back in and working again.
While clearing the contents of his walk-in chiller, he tells Checkpoint working helps keep his mind off what's happened.
Everything at the moment is just so busy, you don't really have time to think. I think that time will come later, but just making sure that we keep trucking along. The worst thing we could do is probably sit down and, you know, when you sit down and relax, it's when you start thinking about all the stuff that has actually happened. The time will come for all of that later on once we've got everything going up again.
So it's a waiting game for businesses who, clear of the COVID years, found themselves in the eye of a storm.
And if you're listening on radio, the video version of that story will be on our webpage. And Jimmy will be live with business owners and their reaction to today's business package. That will be after 6. It is 14 minutes after 5. Kia amo tonu mai. Stay with us. You're listening to Checkpoint on RNZ National. Feeling a little forgotten and a little low in spirits and kai. A Tolaga Bay community leader says they need basic things like cleaning equipment, skip bins and a dump that's open so people can start clearing sludge and destroyed items from their homes. Children in the small, isolated East Coast community north of Gisborne were able to go back to school today. And a short time ago, I spoke with Rina Kirikiri from Te Whare Hauora o Te Atanga a Hauiti and asked her what her community really needs.
People are actually wanting not only the tangible resources like kai, but actually moments of piki wairua where their spirits can be raised, because at the moment we are feeling like we have been forgotten, and we know there's so many communities that, to be quite honest, so many communities that need more help and take their paitira, but the lack of comms to no comms, has been really a real big challenge for our civil defence, our civil defence, and to relay back to our community. So many frustrated whānau, and it's challenging to keep everybody in high spirits. So a range of things we need, but for whānau immediately is some kai supplies, which I know they're on the way shortly. Thank you to the wider networks, and then also cleaning crews are here. So cleaning supplies. One of the big struggles here is our waste management. The dump is closed. It still needs to be cleaned. Our tip, and there's so many whānau that need to clean their homes, our marae. But there's no way to put all that rubbish. So that's huge risk of health risks, as well as just the wairua. The wairua is going up and down. So all of these things are connected. Yeah.
When you can't clean your whare, it's depressing. Yeah.
That's correct. Well, we can clean as much as you can. You've got no equipment to clean, and when you do clean, where are you going to put all the rubbish? You've got wrecked furniture, carpets, a whole lot of rubbish. You don't really want to just put it outside, So we've requested for GDC, the Gisborne District Council, to open our disposal, our tip for longer hours for whānau, and actually just leave it open so we can do that. Maybe for them to actually deliver skips to areas like our marae, Puketawai marae. Did a big clean up this morning thanks to just local people stopping in and help, but they actually need things like skips to take rubbish away, because it's a house risk, yes.
Rina, how many whānau do you have who are displaced, who need somewhere else to live because their homes are, filthy or destroyed?
We actually have, there'll be over on our list high priorities that are displaced, but also isolated. We had over 89 to start with, and it's probably going to rise. So we're still collecting that intel and working closely. And it's, we've got local people on the ground who live here from GDC, one of our housing resource managers. He's been great to collect intel to help the civil defence, just to look at what kind of damage is in that home. So there is quite a few. They've moved out. They were able to evacuate earlier, which is great, but they're still displaced to other areas which are isolated, yes. Some have moved into local marae and some into Tūranga, into Gisborne, to their whānau homes, but at the end of the day, they're still displaced. So they want to return to clean their homes, and just to be home on their papakainga.
I understand the school was open today, Rina. How many kids turned up compared to usual? Do you know?
I don't know the exact numbers, but that was a great move by the kura, because actually there's a lot of kids that want to be going back to normal, yes, and going back to normal. The school has a great program there, and it was quite essential to actually their henengaro, their well-being, their oranga, just around being somewhere different from stuck at home. And also parents, having their break so they can reset themselves, their thinking. So it's really important to get back to something different other than the last couple of days.
Do you know that everybody is safe? Have you managed to make contact? Do you know all your people are safe?
Yes, through the Uawa Civil Defence and through the Fins in Uawa, as well as the police, they've been amazing, and they have connected with as many people, as most people on their list that they have, and we've done follow-ups through Tairawhiti, the Civil Defence also, yes.
That is great news.
It is.
The other thing we are hearing about is concern around work, paid work, and that some workers have been told the forestry is closed down for the moment. What are you hearing about that, and are people worried?
People are definitely worried, and they should be, because, that's their livelihood. That's what we know day to day. So we've had, and that's one of the great things about the Welfare Centre here. So with some of the donations coming through, with some of the kai we have received, is that we've made a priority list through, in partnership with the Uawa Civil Defence on who needs, because we don't have much supply, so who needs that most. So we look at all of those kaimahi, all those workers that have lost their jobs or may not have been paid their income, all of those things we are able to supply kai, some relief, and actually try and work through how we can get them further support through social services. Here at Te Whare Hauora Taitanga Hauati, we've offered hot desks. Today we have IRD to help with individual, personal and business tax information and issues and concerns. Tomorrow we have Work and Income New Zealand and an MSD to come and work through all of those different payment plans, options, and all of their entitlements they may be entitled to. We also have counselling coming through from Ngāti Porou Oranga, Ngāti Porou Whānau Oranga. Just say all of those things bringing together to collaborate with so many organisations to help with the welfare, actually the well-being of our communities, yeah.
You are doing absolutely amazing mahi there. Kia ora rā e hoa. We really appreciate your time and your hard work.
Ka pai. Thank you very much. I do want to shout out to everybody who's reached out to support. We've actually had so many volunteers, but there's not much work to do when we don't have supplies, but we're really thankful for everyone who's stopped by, who's messaged, who's phone called now that we've got a phone. Yeah, so kia ora koutou.
And that's Rina Kerikeri. Now, Te Whare Hauora are taking donations for the community recovery effort, and they've got details on their website about how to do that if you would like to give, and we'll put up a link to that. It is 21 minutes after 5. You're with Checkpoint on RNZ National. Homai o whakaaro, we would love your feedback. Let us know your thoughts on anything you've heard on the programme this evening. The government's announced an initial $50 million support package. That's for business, workers and the primary industry. Final details to be decided over the next week. What do you make of that? What other support do you need if you're out there in the business community or also struggling to go to work because of the damage done? Text us on 2101. You can tweet us at Checkpoint RNZ. And our email address is checkpoints@rnz.co.nz. It's time for the headlines now. Ko Evi anō tēnei.
The government's extending the national state of emergency for another week in the wake of Cyclone Gabrielle. Prime Minister Chris Hipkins and Finance Minister Grant Robertson also set out multi-million-dollar relief packages after today's cabinet meeting. They include a $50 million interim fund for businesses and $250 million for the National Land Transport Fund's emergency budget to rebuild important roads. The Central Hawke's Bay District Council says good progress is being made to reconnect cut-off rural communities. Helicopters are flying into some areas, delivering food and evacuating residents when required. Mayor Alex Walker says the council is checking in with residents in isolated townships as far north as Kiridu and Mangleton. Nearly 3/4 of people in the Hawke's Bay region are now reconnected to electricity, but about 10,000 are still waiting. Electricity company Unison aims to have nearly everyone back online by tomorrow, but says it could take weeks for some remote areas. Roughly 2,000 households are still without power in Auckland. Emergency Management Duty Controller Rachel Kelleher says slips and other obstacles are obstructing repair crews. And officials in Turkey say they've ended rescue efforts in all but 2 provinces as hope fades of finding more earthquake survivors. No one has been pulled alive from the rubble since early Sunday. That is those are the headlines. Now to traffic In the auto queue, Auckland's Northern Motorway, State Highway 1, is closed northbound between Oteha Valley Road up to Silverdale. There's been a serious crash there. There's a detour via East Coast Road or the Dairy Flat Highway. Expect delays if you're going that way. Unfortunately, there is another crash in Auckland that's snarling up State Highway 16. That's at the intersection of State Highway 16 Basil Orr Road at Kaupakapa, and that's been causing delays in both directions. State Highway 23 into Raglan is on target to open up by the end of the month. And State Highway 2 between Gisborne and Ōpōtiki is now open at least for the next hour 40 until 7 p.m. when it will close again. Our next news headlines and traffic is at 5:40.
Ngā mihi, Evie. We don't want you to get too used to these posh TV ways with an auto cue. Thank you. The ongoing war in Ukraine has created a sticky situation for Boxing New Zealand and several of our top female fighters. Despite Boxing New Zealand's preference, the athletes don't take part in next month's Women's World Championship in India. A small group of fighters have decided they will attend the event. Here to explain is sports reporter Clay Wilson. Sounds pretty delicate, Clay. What is going on?
Well, this all comes back to the fact that the IBA, which is the world governing body for boxing, is a Russian-led organisation. So there's concerns even before the war in Ukraine about the corruption in this organisation. The IOC took basically the control of boxing out of the IBA's hands before the Tokyo Olympics. And leading into the Women's World Champs in India, a bunch of these countries who are part of what's called the Common Cause Alliance, which New Zealand is a part of, have decided that they're going to boycott and they won't send athletes to this event. So Boxing New Zealand then had a decision to make. And basically what they decided is the athletes had prepared for so long, they'd self-fundraised thousands of dollars themselves to get to this event, that they left the decision to the athletes. And we've just had it confirmed today that these athletes are going to attend this event. But Boxing New Zealand is towing quite a delicate line here because they want to take a stand here and not be seen to be supporting this Russian-led organisation in any way, but also they've got athletes they're trying to support. But it does sound like this will be the last IBA event that Boxing New Zealand will attend. It's still to be confirmed if these athletes are going to officially go to India where the event is under the banner of New Zealand athletes. They could go as neutrals as well if Boxing New Zealand decides that. So a bit to be decided, but this new alliance is basically trying to set up a new body to take over from this Russian-led organisation, which is sponsored by the big oil company in Russia, which is a state run companies, so a lot of ties to the Russian government and things that a lot of countries aren't that happy with. A lot of big countries, United States, Ireland, the UK, so New Zealand part of that group and towing a line here with this event coming up in India.
Thank you, Clay. That's our sports reporter, Clay Wilson. The clean-up is in full swing in the hard-hit town of Te Karaka, about 30 kilometres west of Gisborne. 80 whānau are still in evacuation centres 5 days after Cyclone Gabrielle rushed through the valley in the middle of the night, forcing residents onto nearby hills for hours. Today, volunteers from around Tairāwhiti joined them to help clean the silt and debris. Jamie Tahana and cameraman Samuel Rillstone have the story.
Te Karaka is a hive of activity today. The sun is out, crews stand shoulder to shoulder, running their shovels along the concrete. Diggers drop their arms into piles of silt. Large trucks reverse up the narrow streets, loading debris house by house. Today, efforts were bolstered by dozens more volunteers from around Tairāwhiti, coordinated by Tahi Hiroki.
Levenham Road and as far as that way, as far as back as Piha and Wharaturu. So I've got crews going out there.
They've come from ports and pack houses, mills and farms.
A bit of shovel work, a bit of lifting, whatever it takes out there.
There's a massive need, unprecedented, unlike we were in Cyclone Bowler in the country, getting trapped in for weeks, getting helicopters dropping supplies off, and we know what it is to have a huge need.
Way deeper and so much more. It went round the woolshed last time, this time it went through it.
As a community or wherever you're from, you just feel, the need to be able to help or assist in any way you can, so that's what we're all out here for.
And at 9 a.m. sharp, they gathered in a ring at the rugby grounds, high-vis and red bands, for a briefing and karakia. Then it was off to work.
We're going to help clean up around the houses and give our local people a bit of a chance to have a relax and be able to get their heads around what's been going on around over the last few weeks. The Tikaraka community is just awesome, bro.
It's sunny in Tikaraka today. The river meanders its gentle course around the edge of town. The rolling hills stand picturesque against a blue sky background. But evidence of devastation is still everywhere. Dried silt puffs up with every step. Condemned houses sit abandoned. Others are busy. Residents pushing wheelbarrows up and down, emptying their ruined possessions into piles on the street. Both marae here, Takipu and Rangatira, have been destroyed. Whānau trying to find a way to preserve the taonga. Every fence, if it's still standing, has debris hanging off every wire. The hillside scarred by mud and slips.
A lot of silt still sitting around the homes, it's just starting to give that stenchy smell, and so if we can try and get a lot of it out of the way, that lessens that smell to be lingering around the community. There's still rubbish that needs to be pulled out of the backyards and stuff like that, so we're going to try and get in there and get those ones done too. Houses need water blasting or whatever we can do to inside of those houses.
One of the volunteers here is Hamish Manuel. Born in Tikaraka, he's been back for nearly a week with the crew and the loaders.
There was a lot of people that didn't actually want to be helped yet. They hadn't processed it. They'd just lost everything.
80 whānau are still in the evacuation centre here. Most homes are either red or yellow stickered. And Tahi Hiroki says adrenaline is fast giving way to exhaustion and uncertainty. It's going to be a long road ahead, he says, and such support will be needed for much longer yet.
We may be a small area of New Zealand, but damn, we've got a lot of people out there that can get out there, and they all come from all walks of life and put their hands on it. So, kia ora whānau, you fellas are mean and awesome out there. Tau kia, brother.
And that piece from Jamie Tahana, there's a video version. We'll put it up on our webpage, filmed by Samuel Rilstone. It is 5:30. Kia amo tonu mai. Do stay with us. You're listening to Checkpoint on RNZ National. And it is, of course, time for the business news. Ko taku hoa e nai ko Nona Peltier. Nona's in the studio with me live. OK, ASB has announced a lending program to support the corporate and rural sector. This is for cyclone-affected people. So what are they offering up?
About $400 million in low-interest loans, and when I mean loan, like 2% discounts, that sort of thing, for 2-year terms. There's also some deals there for personal banking customers, so that would be overdrafts at 0.01%, that kind of thing. It's worth their customers checking out with the bank directly to see what they're entitled to. But it's another way that banks are trying to help out.
And what can you tell us about A2 and uncertainty about A2 Milk's ability to deliver a profit margin growth in future years?
Yeah, this is an interesting one. So A2 Milk is a growth company. It doesn't typically pay a dividend. So people who invest in that company look for growth, and they didn't see it in the median term. So what they're thinking is the company did deliver to expectations in terms of its first half result, and it did also deliver revenue growth, and it says it's tracking to its full year outlook, and that's double-digit growth, so very good, but that's not good enough, not for the shareholders. They wanted to see some future growth, and they didn't, so they marked the company down, 7.5%. It was worse earlier. It was over 8% down, and in any case, that dragged down the index. We dropped the NZX Top 50 index down 2%. That was a 249-point drop to 11,896. That's the lowest level in about a month. The New Zealand dollar is also weaker, 62.4 US cents, 90.6 Australian and 51.9 pence. Again, this is a story about the US dollar. We're not going to hear very much overnight, though, because they're having a holiday. It's Washington's birthday.
Thank you, Nona. Ka kite. Nona Peltier with Business News. On the hard-hit West Coast beaches in Auckland, communities are still dealing with the threat of landslips and the realities of red-stickered homes. In Piha, some people are still calling the surf club home nearly a week on from the cyclone. Our reporter Louise Tanuth and camera operator Marika Habazi have the story.
Oliver Cashmore has been red-stickered twice in 2 weeks. His flat in Langholm in the Waitakere Ranges was hit by Auckland's flooding last month. Then he went to stay with his grandparents here in Piha.
I thought I was going to die that night.
As water began to pool around their property on Garden Road on Monday night, they went to stay in a property above them on higher ground, climbing the steep, slippery steps with his injured grandfather and carrying what they could. They went to bed only to be woken by thudding on the windows as debris came crashing into the house.
We hear a loud crash of glass and we have to figure out what that is. So we go downstairs and there's another bedroom there, and actually what had happened was the glass had smashed and in through came a whole tree, and all this dirt just kept filling up to the point where we couldn't actually open the door anymore after a while.
Cracks appeared in the back wall and the thuds got louder.
I could sort of feel the floor under me giving way, and we actually looked up because they've got these big support sort of beams on the roof, inside the actual, you could see on the ceiling, and they're starting to twist, and at that point we just had to make the decision that we had to get out.
At this point, they knew they needed to flee. He says it was only just in time.
Maybe 30 seconds, maybe a minute later, the house just slid right down, landed on top of their house. So the house that was lower down, so, there's a house on a house.
Drenched and covered in mud, they were finally rescued later that night, driven to safety at the local RSA.
It was just the most miraculous, relief I've ever felt in my life.
He's been at this community hub at the local surf club ever since. His grandparents are staying with friends. The surf club has been a safe haven for residents, with food, clothing, toiletries and accommodation on offer.
There's a lot of inane things that you forget about when you have to walk out of your house in your PJs, or when I come and get you in a boat and you're soaking wet. You've got nothing, even the clothes that you're in are not necessarily of use.
Club custodian and local resident Paul Newham says it's only been possible with the community rallying together.
Yes, our community's been pretty well looked after, but that's all from the effort of local people talking to their friends, talking to their business colleagues and extracting favours, basically.
Finally handing over to Auckland Emergency Management last night, he's thankful but disappointed it's taken so long.
Bit of a political statement there. It's a double-edged sword, right? We know that there are parts of the country that are way worse off than we are. We've lost no lives, we've had no major injuries, but I guess we're victims of our own success because we've got everything up and running and we've got people out of their houses and under control.
They've only just regained power and have been relying on a generator to provide cooking facilities to cater for up to 300 people. But volunteer Angela Smith says it's been getting their hands on enough ingredients that's been the biggest challenge.
We're just putting posts out on the community Facebook pages, and people are bringing in what's required, but we're trying to get access to food to keep going, but it's tricky.
All of it worth it though to help those who desperately need it.
Together and keep the spirits high. At this point, there's a lot of very, very tired people out there.
The weather has improved and a blue sky hangs over Piha today, but the community and officials are urging people to stay away while this community regroups and rebuilds their lives.
And that report from Louise Tanuth, the video version filmed by Marika Habazi, will be on our webpage. It is 27 minutes to 6 and you're with Checkpoint on RNZ National. Some of you have been getting in touch about the support package announced by the government today. Valerie says financial relief needs to go directly to workers, not another wealth transfer of public money to private businesses like what happened during COVID. And this person says surely the forestry owners or employers should be providing support to their workers. It's not appropriate to just tell them no work, go to social services. What are they doing to help? And another says how much, any info on how much the forestry businesses are donating to support cyclone affected residents. Thanks for your feedback. Keep it coming. 2101 on text. So homai o whakaaro, send us your feedback on anything you've heard on the program this evening. Let us know if you've got power in your neck of the woods. I know there's still 15,000 households without it. If you're able to, text us on 2101. You can tweet us at Checkpoint RNZ. Email address is checkpoint@rnz.co.nz. It's time for us to head over to the headlines. Anea Iwi, mina pita kōrero.
Prime Minister Chris Hipkins is setting up a cyclone recovery task force and a Minister for Cyclone Recovery. The task force will be chaired by Sir Brian Roche, with lead ministers for each of the regions affected. Chris Hipkins says the police are on top of crime in parts of Hawke's Bay devastated by Cyclone Gabrielle. There are calls for more police resources on the east coast amid arrests for looting and some communities setting up checkpoints. A top US politician says the United States will do what it can to support storm-affected people. Speaking at Te Papa, Secretary of the Interior, Deb Haaland, confirmed the US has provided satellite imagery to survey the flooding aftermath and stands by to provide more help if requested. The Ministry of Health is reporting 8,220 new cases of COVID-19 over the past week and 24 further deaths. Meanwhile, COVID cases are increasing in Hawke's Bay, but health officials say many people haven't told them about it due to Wi-Fi and power issues. And due to a serious crash, State Highway 1 in North Auckland is closed northbound from Oteha Valley Road off-ramp to Silverdale. Those are the headlines. Our next news and weather is at 6.
Kia ora, Evie. The government is making an initial $50 million available as immediate relief for businesses and workers hit by Cyclone Gabrielle. Another $250 million will be funnelled to Waka Kotahi to repair crucial roading networks. The Prime Minister, Chris Hipkins, says today's support package was just the beginning.
While the full impacts of the cyclone continue to be assessed, it's clear that the damage is significant and on a scale not seen in New Zealand for at least a generation. The required investment to reconnect our communities and future-proof our nation's infrastructure is going to be significant, and it will require hard decisions and a whole-of-government approach. We won't shy away from those hard decisions, and we're working on a suite of measures to support New Zealanders by building back better, building back safer, and building back smarter.
Ministers today have also agreed to extend the national state of emergency for another 7 days. Well, joining us now is the newly appointed Cyclone Recovery Minister, Grant Robertson. Tēnā koe, Minister.
Kia ora, Lisa.
How much of that $50 million will go to, I suppose, wage subsidies?
Yeah, look, I can't say that right now. What we'll do over the course of the next few days is work across local communities, local business associations, iwi, local government, to make sure we're getting that to where it's needed right now. Certainly some of it with the people I spoke to when I was in the Hawke's Bay yesterday, some of that is about enabling their business just to survive for the next little while, to support the people who do work for them. Some of it will be about clearing out, getting access to the facilities that they need to get to. What this is about is just dealing with that very, very immediate need. And as I said earlier today at the Prime Minister's press conference, this is like the other disasters that New Zealand's faced. It's a rolling more. There'll be more announcements, but we still have to scope out the scale of what is needed. That's what happens over the next week or so.
I understand it might be a bit hard to give specifics, but already we're getting messages saying, is this going to filter down to the workers? So suppose what I'm asking is about your intent, what you intend this money to assist with. Do you anticipate it will go in some way to workers' wages to ensure they remain employed?
That may be the case in some situations and for some businesses, but there are a variety of different circumstances that are out there, and also there's a variety of different needs. Now, for example, when we ran, earlier schemes during COVID and so on, we were trying to keep people in the particular job they were in. In the situation we've got here, there is other work that needs to be done as part of the response and part of the recovery. So we've got to be nimble and flexible, but this is very much about those businesses being able to get through the next few weeks, enable them to be able to make good decisions, which includes keeping their staff on, but it will be different for different businesses. That'll be dealt with on the ground where it's best dealt with. We'll have agencies such as the Ministry of Primary Industries and MV involved, but we'll also be led by what we know from talking to businesses on the ground.
So, Minister, are you kind of suggesting there, for an example, some forestry workers have been told there's no work at the moment. So are you suggesting that maybe they could be employed like Task Force Green or on clean-up? Are you suggesting that you could filter workers into those areas?
We're certainly interested in being able to make sure that we get the people who need to be on the ground doing the immediate response work. And so, we're interested in how we can make that work. There's been conversations, I know, over the course of the weekend locally, and then working with various ministers and ministries about how we can support to make sure the right people are in the right place doing the work we need. In addition to that, we've got what we need in terms of immigration. There are going to be people that we're going to try and bring into New Zealand as well. And so the Minister of Immigration will have more to say about that in the coming days.
Okay, I want to ask you about that too. But before then, will you commit to some kind of wage subsidy scheme for this disaster?
I'm committing to make sure we do what needs to be done in this disaster. We're still assessing the extent of the need for that. What you've seen today is a first interim step to be able to deal with the immediate needs that businesses have got.
So the door's still open then, because if you're committing to doing everything needed,
we will make decisions as we go.
Yeah. Your initial thoughts, given you're the Recovery Minister, and I know you've been in the job, a nanosecond, but are you anticipating that you will have to bring construction workers and road workers in so that we've got enough people to do the work that is required?
I think it's certain that we will need to bring some workers in. This is a massive rebuild and recovery phase that we will be going into. We do so in a very tight global labour market. It's important to note that, across the world there are labour shortages, but clearly that will be part of the picture. So we've got redeployment that we can look at inside New Zealand, and we can also look at who we can get from outside.
And will you be trying to make it easy for them to get here, easier?
That's the work that the Minister of Immigration's got underway at the moment. I'm not going to preempt that, but he'll have more to say about that in the coming days.
Roads. You indicated when you made your statement this afternoon that potentially some of them shouldn't be rebuilt. Have you got any in particular in mind?
No, I don't. The point that we were making is that the funding that's been put out today, the $250 million, is to make sure we get those lifeline roads open, we get isolated communities connected, we make sure that supply chain routes are available. The next piece of work is to look at the broader roading network and the long-term rebuild. That's where some of the big bills come in here, because there is significant rebuilding. I think it's about 400 kilometres of state highway that we're having to relook at right now. That doesn't mean that, those roads will be closed for a long time, closed at all, but we do have to make sensible decisions about where we build bridges and where we build roads into the future. You'll imagine, Lisa, that's not decisions we can make straight away right now.
You described it as rolling more money to come. Can you tell us when the next instalment will be announced?
This will be a continual process. The Prime Minister announced today that he's establishing a Cabinet Committee, which he's asked me to chair, so that we've got a regular decision point on that. And as has been done in previous disasters, the government will make sure we support people. There are usually three phases to these things. We're still in the response phase. We move to the recovery and then we move to the rebuild. At each of those stages, the government will be there to contribute, work alongside local communities. We very much want our response to be driven by the needs of local communities, and that's why the Prime Minister's appointing regional lead ministers. They've all been asked to come back, talk to their community, and then come back within a week with the needs that they've got. So you can expect to see more announcements over the coming weeks.
Appreciate your time. That is the newly appointed Cyclone Recovery Minister, Grant Robertson, who is also the Minister of Finance. It is for 14 minutes to 6. Kia mau tonu mai. Do stay with us. You're listening to Checkpoint on RNZ National. The resilience of the people of the Hawke's Bay is shining through 7 days on from Cyclone Gabrielle, and 10,000, most in Napier City, are still without power. Electricity company Unison says it hopes to get it restored to nearly everyone by tomorrow. But as our reporter Timothy Brown found out when he visited affected areas, residents aren't letting it get them down.
At Muriwai School in Napier, there's no classes on, but there's a barbecue, a sense of community, and plenty of smiling faces, which is most important considering what they've been through. CJ Furlong, who lives on Auckland's North Shore, says he felt moved to help after speaking to his cousin Hannah, who works as a teacher at the school.
I found out from my cousin that people in the community from her school were absolutely devastated by this and lost everything, and hearing stories from my cousin, she got people staying with them that spent the night on top of rooftops and holding on to hedges overnight to survive, and it just broke my heart, and I just thought, well, what can I do to help?
The answer was to put the call out to his local community for donations. His plan to bring a minivan to Hawke's Bay transformed into a trailer, and after 9 hours of driving yesterday, he was able to deliver clothes, food and more to the community of Muriwai today.
Oh, it's absolutely awesome. To see everyone with a smile on their face that have gone through so much, and just bringing the community together is just absolutely fantastic. And it just goes to show, makes me feel, well, I've done the right thing and it was well worth it. And I'd do it again at a drop of a hat, not a problem.
Principal Chris Maynell says it's exactly what the community needed.
Food supplies have been running low for many. Some of our community have still got no power, certainly not reliable, and everybody knows someone who's lost everything. So, it's just really nice to bring people together today, have a cup of tea, some free kai, and just connect, and people need people. So it's nice just to connect as a community again.
And in nearby Marae Nui, giving is also the theme. Marae Nui Foursquare manager Govt Piha says they only got power back at their store on Saturday, but they didn't let their stock go to waste.
We just opened for 2 days, for 2 hours to get rid of our stuff. So we just actually, instead of throwing away the stuff, we just given away.
Marae Nui is one of New Zealand's most deprived areas, but people are trying to keep a smile on their face, despite some now having gone 7 days without power. Jean Beamsley, who's lived in the suburb for 40 years, says the community came together to clear trees which had toppled in the storm and were blocking roads and driveways.
Even in the rain, we're all out there in the rain, right down to a 5-year-old that was carrying a little twig across the road, to an old kaumātua who was cleaning all the gutters. So, yeah, we all just pitched in. And I think we still are.
She's philosophical about the lack of electricity.
No matter how tough it is, we're just pulling together and getting on with it. No moaning. I haven't heard anyone moan yet. The only thing that they're saying too, which is quite funny, that we have to talk to each other now.
Geddes Street resident Michelle Clarebert says she lost about $200 worth of food, money she can ill afford to waste, but the community has provided a barbecue, use of a gas oven, ice and a chilli bin. Ms Clarebert says she's been having cold showers all week and is suffering an ear infection. It hasn't been an easy week.
But we've had a lot easier than a lot of people.
And that message is being echoed by those throughout this strong, brave and resilient community.
Okay, an update on the water situation in Napier. Water conservation remains critical. We are being told the city's drinking water is safe to drink, but people are being urged to follow these simple guidelines. Here they are. Don't rush to flush. Keep toilet flushing to an absolute minimum. 1-minute showers. Consider that a challenge. If you have to shower, keep it quick, they're saying. Even better to take a sponge bath. Wash dishes by hand. Save laundry washing for a few days' time, or wash items by hand. Don't hose silt in driveways, please. This will clog the stormwater and cause flooding, even in minor rain, we are being told. So still critical to conserve water in the Napier area. And there are calls tonight for a rethink of a massive housing development planned for flood-prone Hawke's Bay land. More than 600 homes, including a mix of kāinga ora and affordable homes, are on the cards for the so-called Riverbend Road development across several sites near the suburb of Marae Nui. It's an iwi-led development on land bought by the government, but the land has in the past been swamped in floods and, well, it's been hit again. Napier Mayor Kirsten Wise has described it as the last place houses should be built, and Hawke's Bay Regional Councillor Neil Curtin has been outspoken about the flood risk too, and he joins us now. Kia ora, Neil.
Kia ora to you, Lisa.
Do you reckon this development should go ahead?
Oh, absolutely not. No, this is just dumb stuff to even contemplate that in the first instance. And I've been saying that well before this catastrophe in front of us now. It shouldn't be built there, and in my view, will not be built there. I'll be battling it every step of the way, even if that takes us to the Supreme Court. This is not going to take place.
When you say it's dumb stuff, why is it dumb?
The zone in which they're proposing to build these houses is the lowest point in Napier. It's in many instances below sea level. I visited the site at the height of the recent storm, and completely inundated. It's a retention dam to deal with our stormwater issues in the city. and to build in that, to even contemplate building in that site is frankly just absolutely nuts.
Why was it chosen in the first place?
Oh, look, that's a mystery to me, Elisa. It's of concern that Kaingaora, who purchased the land, and I think to the value of something like 13 million, I'd have to confirm that, who then have waived that prospect in front of iwi, local iwi, Mana Hariri, and the local iwi Kahununu, to essentially get it over the line, and that's really frustrating from my perspective that these tactics have been employed to get it under the shadow and under the cloak of emergency legislation, fast-tracking that before the Environmental Protection Agency.
You're talking about the resource consent concessions made during COVID, right?
Yes,
so it was allowed. This is allowed to be fast-tracked and is in that process at some point.
Yes, it is. Yes, so what we've had is one government agency, Kaingaora, purchasing land and then utilising the cloak of the fast-track legislation to try and get it through and passed so that the development can take place. An abusive process, in my view.
So houses are desperately needed, and even more so now because people have been displaced. I mean, what is Kaingaora to do? What should they do with this bit of dirt? Because it's expensive, and where should they go if not there?
Oh, look, it's totally dumb, and the person making that investment decision on their behalf needs to come up and face the people of Hawke's Bay and Napier and explain themselves. There are plenty of opportunities. In fact, we're exploring some at the current point in time up on the hills. That's where the development should take place. It's been designated as such, and there are opportunities there for the councils to move on, and we're actually exploring that option as we speak.
So bottom line, Kaingaora should do what in a sentence?
Well, apologise to start with to the taxpayer for utilising funds in this way, wasting them, and secondly, pull your head in and get going with a development in a location that actually makes sense, and that's up in the Western Hills of Napier.
So scrap this altogether, outright.
Indeed, yes. Yeah, leave it. Give it to the Napier City. Bequest it to the Napier City Council and the Regional Council to turn into the retention dam, the emergency waterway, and in fact, that's what it is.
Thank you for your time. Neil Curtin there, Hawke's Bay Regional Councillor. In the UK, a high-profile missing persons case appears to have come to an end. Police searching for Nicola Bully say a body has been found in the river in Lancashire, near where the mother of two lived. She disappeared on a riverside while walking her dog 3 weeks ago. The story dominated headlines across Britain with widespread speculation online about what had happened to her. The BBC's Judith Moritz has more.
The search for Nicola Bully has been on land, in water and by air. Today, as the police helicopter circled overhead, news for the first time that she might have been found. The police were called just after 11:30 this morning to reports of a body in the River Wyre, a short distance downriver from where Nicola was last seen. Roads around the village of St Michael's were closed, and the footpath along the water's edge was also sealed off. An underwater search team and specialist officers went into the water. Sadly, they found a body, and it was taken for the identification process to begin. A forensics tent was erected to preserve the scene. Lancashire police say it's too early to know whether it is Nicola Bully. Her family is being kept informed as work's carried out to identify the remains. The body was found just after this bend in the river. It's an area which has been searched before, though search teams have previously said that some parts of the water are hard to see because of debris. The investigation into Nicola Bully's disappearance has attracted widespread speculation, and after the police released personal details about her, there's been a public and political backlash. At the centre of it all, there's a distressed family who are waiting for news.
Okay, let's get to some messages for you in different areas. This is from Civil Defence in Hawke's Bay. If you have dead livestock that you need to dispose of, the Hawke's Bay Regional Council is advising that if you are on a farm, can you please bury your own livestock as per normal conditions. If you are not on a farm or there are too many on the property for the landowner to deal with, they're providing this number to call, which is 0800 108 838. 0800 108 838 if you need assistance in disposing of dead livestock. Taira Whiti, some advice from Civil Defence on the fibre cable. Spark is building back its services over the fibre link. Broadband is back up, they are saying. ATMs and banking services will progressively be connected over the next 24 hours. So that is a bit of good news. And power outages. 618 customers are still without power around Tauwharepare, inland to Piha and Tauro Valley, Tiniroto, Bushy Knoll, Taumata, Tahora, and there's about 618 customers. The Tiniroto bypass is now open and teams will turn their focus to the Wharekopai Road with 2 bridges to fix. That doesn't sound like a quick one either. Curbside collection is back to normal, we are told, but there is a limit of 2 bags of stickered rubbish. So you can put your rubbish out as per usual, but 2 bags of stickered rubbish, please. And water, please continue to conserve water. Continue to only use the city water supply for drinking, short showers and food prep. No need to boil it, they say. It is treated to New Zealand drinking water standards. And if you need water for cleaning flood damaged items, fresh untreated water is available for collection by taking your own containers to Wash and Go at 156 Carnarvon Street, and you can do that between 8 a.m. and 4 p.m.
RNZ News at 6 o'clock. Ngā mihi o te pō. Good evening. Ko Evie Ashton tēnei. The government says Waka Kotahi is squarely focused on restoring key transport networks. $250 million has been located to the National Land Transport Fund to repair crucial roading networks destroyed by Cyclone Gabrielle. Finance Minister Grant Robertson says some roads have been totally wiped out in the flooding.
Waka Kotahi is prioritising based on lifelines, getting access for isolated communities. The funding we announced today is to give some assurance that over the next few months that we can prioritise that work and get those other networks reconnected.
The government is also making an initial $50 million available as immediate relief for businesses and workers hit by Cyclone Gabrielle. The Prime Minister says the police are on top of crime in parts of Hawke's Bay devastated by Cyclone Gabrielle. There are calls for more police resources on the east coast amid arrests for looting and some communities setting up checkpoints. Chris Hipkins says there are 140 extra police officers in Hawke's Bay and they have things under control.
Police aren't seeing any evidence to suggest that there's a degree of lawlessness as some of the rumour mill might be suggesting. In fact, they've got the situation under control. That's not to say that people aren't feeling anxious. Of course they're feeling anxious. In many cases they've gone for nearly a week without power. I don't think that people should play to that fear though. Let's be objective about this. The police do have the situation under control.
Napier Mayor Kirsten Wise says she's hearing from people scared and alone who are witnessing aggressive and intimidating behaviour. Infection from contaminated silt is becoming a problem in many regions as people clean up after the cyclone. Hawke's Bay health officials are recording an increase in foot injuries as people stand on nails or other debris walking through floodwater or sludge. Medical Officer of Health, Dr. Bridget Wilson, says there's also more gastroenteritis around caused by contaminated food or water. She says people involved in the cleanup need to take simple hygiene precautions.
Really washing your hands thoroughly after you've been touching silt and, damaged and flooded surfaces, because there is that risk of contamination with sewage and other things that certainly can make people pretty crook afterwards.
Dr. Bridget Wilson says there also appears to be an increase in the number of people contracting COVID-19, but they aren't informing health authorities due to Wi-Fi issues. Napier is lowering its water restriction levels to allow businesses such as cafes and restaurants to reopen. Napier City Council says drinking water in the city is safe, but the wastewater network is still running on generators and the wastewater treatment plant remains offline. The council says the shift from level 5 to level 4 restrictions doesn't allow industrial business to start operations, with water conservation remaining critical. Te Tairawhiti Civil Defence says good progress has been made contacting communities isolated by Cyclone Gabrielle. Civil Defence Controller Ben Green says he's reasonably confident everyone has been reached. He says the challenge now is working out a schedule to keep in contact with the communities and maintaining welfare support in the coming days and weeks. Central Gisborne remains at an extreme alert level for water use. Residents are being asked to only use their mains supply for drinking, food preparation and short showers. The Thames Coromandel Council says just over a dozen people are still in temporary accommodation following Cyclone Gabrielle. Of the few properties building inspectors have been able to access, 9 have red stickers and 8 have yellow. Civil Defence Controller Gary Towler says all the evacuation centres in the region have closed and most people have returned home. Sorry, we appear to be having some difficulty with that audio. Gary Towler estimates 95% of the region has had power and road access restored, but small pockets are still isolated. Marlborough is sending 6 emergency responders to Auckland to help in the wake of Cyclone Gabrielle. The team is qualified in ground-based rescue, setting up civil defence centres and mass rescue, helicopter and four-wheel drive response. They range in age from their early 20s to their 60s. Mayor Nadine Taylor says the responders have worked on a number of emergencies, including the Kaikoura earthquake response, the Gita and Fahey storms in Nelson, Tasman and Marlborough's last 2 flood responses in 2021 and 2022. An Australian university professor and several local students have been taken hostage in the Papua New Guinea highlands. It comes after New Zealand pilot Philip Mertens was taken hostage in Indonesia's Papua province earlier this month. The ABC's Natalie Whiting reports from PNG.
The research team was working in a remote part of Papua New Guinea's highlands when they were kidnapped by an armed group. The Australian professor, along with a program coordinator, a museum officer and a graduate of the University of PNG, are all being held hostage. The ABC understands some guides from the local area who were with the group were also initially taken but later released. PNG's Prime Minister James Muriwai says negotiations are currently underway to try to secure the group's release, with local missionaries acting as intermediaries.
And some commuters heading north out of Auckland tonight are likely to experience large delays. A person has died after 2 vehicles crashed on State Highway 1 at Dairy Flat. The police say the collision on the northern motorway happened at 4:30. That's the news.
I'm Susie Ferguson. On 9 to noon tomorrow, our coverage of the national state of emergency and the devastation and recovery from Cyclone Gabrielle continues. Also, insurance entrepreneur Naomi Ballantyne and the Superlight custom-made tramping packs, handmade here in New Zealand. All with me, Susie Ferguson, on 9 to noon on RNZ National.
You're back with Lisa Owen next on Checkpoint. Right now, the short forecast from Met Service to midnight Tuesday. For Northland and Auckland, mostly fine. Isolated afternoon or evening showers. Coromandel Peninsula and Bay of Plenty, fine, but isolated showers developing this afternoon. Becoming mostly cloudy tonight with drizzle patches. From Waikato to Whanganui and the Central High Country. Also for Gisborne, Hawke's Bay and Waded Upper. Fine, some isolated showers about the ranges during the afternoons and evenings. Manawatu, Horowhenua, Kapiti Coast and Wellington, partly cloudy. Nelson, Marlborough and Canterbury, also for Bulla. Fine apart from a few showers developing in Bulla tomorrow morning and southern Canterbury tomorrow evening. Westland and Fiordland, periods of rain from south of Hokitika to Milford Sound. Otherwise mainly fine apart from isolated showers. Tomorrow rain with heavy falls developing everywhere. Otago and Southland, fine today. Tomorrow rain with heavy falls developing. And for Kohu, Chatham Islands, fine but cloudy periods increasing later tomorrow. It's 7 minutes past 6. I'll have news headlines for you at 6:30.
Nā mihi iwi, no mai hoki mai, this is Checkpoint, ko Lisa Owen tēnei. The government has unveiled a $300 million financial lifeline for the areas hardest hit by Cyclone Gabrielle. Prime Minister Chris Hipkins announced Finance Minister Grant Robertson as the new Cyclone Recovery Minister. He will have ministers reporting to him from different regions. Mr Robertson has described the relief package as a rolling maul. It includes $250 million for both state highways and local roads. He says 400 kilometres of roading across Tairawhiti and the Bay of Plenty alone have been damaged. There is also a support package to help keep businesses afloat.
Cabinet has agreed to a $50 million fund to get immediate support to businesses, workers and the primary sector. The fund will provide a range of support depending on need, but it is expected to include discretionary funding for flood recovery, business continuity support, resilience advice and mental wellbeing support. Ministers will finalise the allocation of this fund in the coming week, and we will do that in cooperation with local business associations, iwi and local government. Cabinet has also agreed today to extend a range of tax relief measures to cyclone-affected regions, including interest write-offs and filing date waivers.
Our reporter Jimmy Ellingham has spent the day in Hawke's Bay speaking to businesses, and he joins us now live from Napier. Jimmy, how are business owners feeling about the package the government has announced?
Well, so far they're awaiting more detail, but for many business owners in Napier, the weekend just gone was a big loss for them. It was supposed to be Art Deco weekend, the biggest weekend for the district, and I'm joined now by Raywin Daly from the Napier Antique and Jewellery Centre. Raywin, how big is Art Deco weekend normally for you?
It's huge. It's the weekend that sees us through the winter. The people, it's crazy. You can't move in town. The dollar's immense. It's a huge loss.
Now, you told me earlier you only had $100 of sales on Saturday. What would you normally expect on Art Deco Saturday?
Well, in the vicinity of a couple of tens of thousands. Yeah, 20,000.
Goodness me. And how many staff do you have?
We've got 4 full-timers and 3 casuals.
So would you like to see a wage subsidy?
Oh, yes. As soon as possible, please.
What else does your business need?
Some tax help. Anything would be gratefully accepted, but I think what we need is something now. Waiting is hard and uncertain for everyone, including our staff.
We heard Grant Robertson have that $50 million announcement today, which said more details will be released in coming days. You've been across that. What do you think of it?
I've looked briefly at it and spoken to a couple of people, and the feedback that I've had and what I've thought is it was too vague. And no certainty. We need the certainty now. We need some help. You know, a lot of businesses are week to week, and you know they'll be gone.
And how are businesses doing?
We're not.
Yeah, so businesses are struggling in Napier. We heard from many people today it's just too early to say exactly what they need. They're still in clean-up mode, many of them. It's a busy time of the year in Hawke's Bay as well. We've got concerts that are scheduled to be on. Sting was supposed to play at the Mission, but that's now been cancelled. We've heard his promoters say, out of respect for the victims of Hurricane or Cyclone Gabrielle, and his promoter will make a donation to relief funds. We've also just heard in the last few minutes that Lord's concerts off for similar reasons. There's also Cyndi Lauper and Sir Rod Stewart are on the cards for the next few days or next few weeks. No word on those so far.
Thank you, Jimmy. That's Jimmy Ellingham joining us live there from the Hawke's Bay. And just to keep you updated, if you are joining us from Hawke's Bay on Tairawhiti, the national state of emergency has been extended for another 7 days. Cabinet has announced $250 million to help Waka Kotahi assess and rebuild roads and $50 million to help impacted businesses, details of which will be released in the coming days. The death toll from Cyclone Gabrielle remains at 11. 6,517 people remain uncontactable, but some of those people have been reported missing multiple times. 4,260 people have been reported safe. 15,000 New Zealanders are still without power, but 70% of Napier households are now connected. Cell phone coverage is at about 90%. The drinking water in Napier and Hastings is safe to drink. The Defence Force has 950 people in affected areas, and the HMNZS Canterbury will arrive in Napier tomorrow with supplies, including bridge building equipment. A week after Cyclone Gabrielle ripped through the North Island, some streets in the West Auckland community of Muriwai remain cordoned off, with residents unable to access their homes. While geotechnical engineers wait for conditions to be safe enough to complete assessments of the area, residents are caught in limbo. But one resident is trying to turn the despair into hope and keep displaced people within the community. Tom Taylor reports.
Across Auckland, 202 homes have been red-stickered since Cyclone Gabrielle tore through last week. A large number of these are in the coastal community of Muriwai, which was devastated by large slips. Auckland Emergency Management Deputy Controller Rachel Kelleher says some of Muriwai's streets remain extremely dangerous.
There is just such a heightened risk of further land movement, and just given the nature of the cliff faces in that area, if they did start to move, then they could move very, very quickly and could have seriously catastrophic impacts on the surrounding property, and if people were in that area, obviously them as well.
Most of Muriwai's Domain Crescent and a large area of Motutara Road have been cordoned off, with access tightly controlled. Ms Kelleher says further assessments are needed before officials will consider allowing anyone back into their homes, even to grab supplies. And while some residents are anxious to rescue pets they weren't able to take with them as they urgently evacuated their properties, she says the safety of humans is paramount.
The very strong message is that those cordons have been put there for a reason, the placards are there for a reason, and it's very much because we want people to be safe, and that we can't guarantee that if people were to enter those properties that they wouldn't be placing themselves at some level of grave risk.
Ms Kelleher could not provide a figure on the number of people displaced from their homes, but Muriwai resident Shay Boddington says there are a lot of people now wondering what their futures will hold and whether they will be able to remain in town.
Losing your house is one thing, and that's obviously pretty heartbreaking, but the more devastating thing for Muriwai residents is when they lose their community and would have to move outside of the township that we all love so much.
Ms Boddington's the director of Shay's Tiny Homes and thinks her area of expertise could become part of the solution for Muriwai. To that end, she's offering to build a tiny home for anyone who's had their home red-stickered or lost it to a slip. And she's committed to doing it all at cost and as quickly as possible.
It depends on how many houses we have in stock in terms of the short term, but in terms of building, there's, the turnaround is about 8 weeks. So if we got more people involved, we could build more houses, we could get a lot of people settled in the sort of 2 to 3 month mark.
Ms Boddington's already relocating one tiny home back to Muriwai for a family who lost their home. She says the face of the community could change, with many people scared to return to their homes even if they're signed off by building assessors. To provide for those people, she now needs residents with any spare pockets of land to come forward.
There's a lot of farmland in Muriwai, there's a lot of big properties where there'd be many suitable parking spots, locations for tiny houses. A little nook on a farm somewhere, the corner of someone's garden. It's amazing how compact these homes are.
Asked whether Ms Boddington's vision of a tiny home community could form part of Auckland's recovery process, Ms Kelleher said she could not speak to tiny homes directly.
Certainly looking at how we can support communities, what we need to do to enable people to have access to housing, all of those things will be traversed as part of the broader recovery plan that will take place.
Ms Kelleher says the emergency management team will look at allowing residents managed re-entry into their homes as soon as it is safe to do so.
People in rural parts of Hawke's Bay are still finding it hard to access what they need. Flooding wiped out 2 bridges and caused multiple slips around Puketapu, and for many, the only contact with the outside world is by helicopter. Farmer Erin Train, her 2 teenage sons and elderly mother-in-law still have no power and limited phone coverage.
Feeling of isolation is pretty overwhelming. The community's phenomenal. Mental health will be huge, just trying to control anxiety. I mean, you can't sleep, you can't eat, you just feel sick, So, I've actually just taken the last 2 days. The stock are pretty happy just to focus on myself, really, because I'm no good to anyone if I'm no good.
Erin Train says helicopters have been buzzing overhead and a surprise visit by a family provided a magical moment.
They flew it in. We had a community meeting at a woolshed down the road, and they flew in the chopper with just bags full of groceries, and so grateful for the food. But the biggest lift to everyone's just the handwritten notes and seeing me hug my sister-in-laws, and I've never felt such elation in my life as the chopper coming in and hugging my family. I know I'm so lucky to have had that opportunity, and everything getting offloaded, but oh man, standing there watching that chopper disappears really hard. really hard. But yeah, we're safe, we're happy.
And Erin Train says she understands the Army may be bringing a Bailey Bridge and clearing roads this week, which is something to look forward to. As Mrs Train was talking, some relief arrived.
Anything with contours just slipped. So some of the country just looks awesome and stunning. Tell me if you want me to stop. This chopper's going to fly straight over the top with a fuel thing swinging underneath. Might be a big generator, actually. Yep, big generator.
So what's flying over right now?
Helicopter with a big generator on a sling. So, so a lot of our nice country is good. We lost the dam over the gorge, and I thought that was quite serious. Main thing, boundary fence is gone, so pretty hard to contain stock.
Erin Train says the isolated community is using diggers, tractors, trailers and quad bikes to clear roads and paddocks as much as they can. It is 18 minutes after 6 and you're with Checkpoint on RNZ National. Turkey has ended most of its rescue operations nearly 2 weeks after huge earthquakes killed tens of thousands of people. Survivors have continued to be found alive under the rubble since disaster struck. And yesterday, a couple and their 12-year-old child were rescued in Hatay almost 300 hours after the earthquake. The child later died. CNN's Sanjay Gupta reports on the medics working in makeshift facilities to care for survivors.
In operation on 35-year-old Hassan Gocher. He has 2 fractures in his femur, and these doctors are working intently to stabilize the bone. Just watching this, you probably can't tell where this operation is actually taking place.
Just to give you an idea, we're in a tent in the middle of a parking lot outside the hospital in a quake zone, and they're doing orthopedic surgery here.
Is that Dr. Gupta?
Yes, it is.
Oh my gosh, good to see you.
How you doing?
This is Dr. Greg Hellworth, an orthopedic surgeon from Indiana who flew over as soon as he heard about the earthquake. Right now, Dr. Hellworth is worried about bleeding. So over here, in another part of the tent, they have found Hassan's brother to be a match and have him hooked up and quickly donating. A true blood brother. In the middle of a natural disaster, you do whatever it takes to save a life.
What would have happened to someone like him if he didn't have this operation?
I've worked in places before where people like this don't have the operation. They lay at home, languish. Some of them would get bed sores, blood clots, pneumonia, and maybe die from that.
Before the earthquake, Hassan would have likely gotten his operation here, at this hospital in Antakya in southern Turkey. It's still standing on the outside, yes, but completely wrecked inside, no longer functional.
This hospital is destroyed, so there's no other place to seek care. It's not just about the broken bones and the crush injuries, it's about these patients also. Supply chain's a real challenge.
This is the team from Samaritan's Purse. Elliot Tenpenny is an ER doctor from North Carolina.
And we have had aftershocks, 4, 5.0, and it sways the tents back and forth and knocks things over, but nothing major.
So all the work that you need to do can still be done?
Yeah, absolutely.
Over just 36 hours, they put up all these tents, set up generators, communication dishes, even brought their own water purifiers.
We use this machine here. It's a reverse osmosis machine. It allows us to get it from anywhere, including the ocean, and do desalination if we want to.
And then you just keep it in these bladders, and it's in use. And these look full, so this is a process constantly happening.
All of this, so they're able to give the best care to their patients. Like 1-year-old Mehmet. His mother, Sasan, glued to his side, telling us her story through a translator.
And what was happening to him?
He couldn't breathe anymore, not properly.
She thought he had the flu the past few days, but things got worse this morning. Maybe from the fumes. As many people have been doing, they were burning plastic to stay warm. The diagnosis? Bronchitis and asthma. So severe, he was put on anesthetic gases to open up his airways and keep him alive. Hassan is alive as well, recovering with his brother's blood providing sustenance.
Number 10.
Care, plus prayers, is giving these patients hope, and an entire community devastated with loss a lifeline.
As more people around the world suffer from often debilitating long COVID, researchers are rushing to find a way to help ease the symptoms. A new study is looking at whether exercise can unlock some benefits, and so far the results are encouraging. The ABC's Alexandra Humphreys reports.
Tasmanian woman Kerry Jones contracted COVID last September, and it's lingered.
I was very sick for 2 weeks with COVID, and then I just really didn't have enough energy. Everything I did became harder and harder. I didn't sort of recover from doing things as much as I could before.
Before her illness, the 63-year-old loved rowing and yoga, but afterwards she found herself unable to live the life she was used to.
I just wanted to go to bed all day.
Now she's getting back on the bike, under medical supervision.
Oh, really good. No, I wasn't sure to grab. It's just after a while you sort of...
Kerry Jones has joined a study being run by the Baker Heart and Diabetes Institute in Melbourne and the Menzies Institute in Hobart. It's looking into how exercise might be able to help improve symptoms in people suffering long COVID.
The reason I did the trial was because any help that you can give science is good for your grandkids in the long run. It's good for everyone.
Leading cardiologist and principal investigator Tom Marwick says so far the study is showing promising results. It's focusing on people with reduced exercise capacity post-COVID, who make up about a quarter of people with long COVID symptoms who participated in the pilot program.
In the initial part of the study, we exercised some of those people in an exercise training program. And we saw that of the people that were followed up to date, which is less than a dozen, we found that all of them improved their exercise workload, and all but one of them significantly improved the measures that we use for assessing functional capacity.
Clinical trials are beginning after the initial stages showed participants experienced about a 15% increase in the amount of exercise they were able to do. Each patient has a personalised program.
So we find out how they're most limited. Some of them have got a loss of muscle bulk, and therefore we need to do some strength training in them. But generally speaking, we're doing aerobic exercise, and we're increasing that as their ability to exercise increases.
But that doesn't mean long COVID sufferers should go out and begin an exercise program alone, and it's not a cure for all long COVID symptoms.
We think that this is a situation where exercise needs to, if you like, be prescribed like a medication. It's not giving a message to people post-COVID that they just need to go and exercise. It's not helpful.
Professor Marwick says while it's early days for the study, it's been encouraging.
We're absolutely thrilled. I mean, these participants have really been very compromised after COVID. They're often quite depressed because obviously it's limiting their ability to do the things that they want to do. There's no easy solution to the problem. We haven't even characterised the illness adequately at the moment. So to see some of them showing a significant symptomatic benefit, that's a great result.
Kerry Jones is hoping she'll keep improving through the next stages.
I would like to have a little bit more energy. I can do most things, but then I have a long time to recover and get back the energy. So hopefully my energy levels will be more consistent.
Some very important pandas are returning to China from Japan later this week. Thousands of fans yesterday bade farewell to the 4 expected to make the journey. One of the stars is Xiang Xiang, a 5-year-old who leaves tomorrow. The BBC's Andrew Ochi-Ying has more.
For months now, Vladimir Putin has been wooing China's president. So is all that diplomacy about to pay off? So far, China has neither endorsed nor condemned Russia's invasion of Ukraine, calling instead for a peaceful solution. But the US believes Russian forces in Ukraine are already getting surveillance and other information from Chinese firms. And America's top diplomat now believes that China could be going further and providing weapons.
We have seen them provide non-lethal support to Russia for use in Ukraine. The concern that we have now is based on information we have that they're considering providing lethal support. And we've made very clear to them that would cause a serious problem for us and in our relationship.
That message was delivered at a security conference in Munich, where Mr. Blinken met China's foreign minister behind closed doors. He was here to brief European counterparts on China's imminent so-called peace plan for Ukraine that some analysts fear could call for the West to stop arming Ukraine.
China is not a party to this crisis in Ukraine, but we are not standing idly by, nor have we thrown fuel on the fire. We are more opposed to profiting from the fire. What China is doing, as I said earlier, is to urge peace and promote talks. We will stand firmly on the side of peace and on the side of dialogue.
Until now, China has stayed largely at one remove from the war in Ukraine, but the fear among Western policymakers here is that that may be about to change, and there's uncertainty about what it might mean.
If China is behind Russia here, then it is a great power that has and can provide weapons. That is definitely making the conflict and the war bigger.
And it will be of concern?
Definitely.
Before the war, both men met at the Winter Olympics and agreed what they called a partnership with no limits. We may find out shortly if that's true.
Okay, before we go, some hopefully helpful information. In the Hawke's Bay, medical clinics will be flown into the isolated communities of Te Pōhui, Tūtera, Puki Tiriti and Pātoka tomorrow, and they'll be able to provide prescriptions and emergency care, medical needs assessment and mental health support. So those clinics are going to be flown into those isolated communities tomorrow. Te Pōhui, Tūtera, Puki Tiriti and Pātoka tomorrow for that. Also in Napier, you're being warned to stay out of parks, they say, because of the danger of falling branches and trees and high winds. It is essential to stay out of parks and cemeteries, please. That is all we've got time for. Tune in at 5 a.m. tomorrow. First up is back in Tolaga Bay, speaking to out-of-work forestry workers about their future, and Nationals Deputy Leader Nicola Willis gives her take on the government's relief package. 5 a.m.
RNZ News headlines at 6:30. Ngā mihi o te pō ko Evie Ashton tēnei. Newly minted Cyclone Recovery Minister Grant Robertson says cyclone-affected businesses may be able to access government support grants within the next week. An initial $50 million is being made available. The government is also setting up a cyclone recovery task force with a lead minister appointed for each of the regions affected. They'll work with communities to find the approach to meet local needs. The government's putting another $250 million into the National Land Transport Fund to repair crucial roading networks. And the National Party wants harsher penalties for crimes committed in flood or cyclone-stricken areas. Prime Minister Chris Hipkins says the law and order situation in Hawke's Bay is under control. Those are the headlines. Our next news and weather is at 7 o'clock.
I'm Mahingarangi Forbes, and I'll be discussing all the big issues this election year with Māori commentators, newsmakers, and even the odd politician on RNZ's new podcast, Mata.
They will say that the next election will be based on the economy.
So join me for Mata with Mahingarangi Forbes after the 6:30 headlines tomorrow evening on RNZ National.
The time is 29 minutes to 7 and you're listening to Trending Now. I'm Evie Ashton. Today on The Detail, how did a Kiwi pilot get caught up in a rebel group's demands for West Papua's independence